Hello students, welcome to all in this virtual classes. This class is meant for the BA second year students. The title of the paper is Literature in English. In this video, we will learn the plot summary of the famous novel Far from the Madding Crowd, which is written by Thomas Hardy. And in this video, we will see the summary of the novel. In this novel, the major protagonist of the Gabriel Oak, he is the main protagonist, and around him the Gabriel Oak and the Bathsheba, these are the main protagonists in this novel. As well as if we see the main characters that I have already told in the earlier my videos, that main characters were Gabriel Oak, Bathsheba Everdeen, Sir John and Francis Troy, William Boldwood, Fanny Robin, Lily Sammelbury, John Coggan, Kenny Ball and Pennywise. So if you see the prominent character in this novel, that are the around them this whole novel rotates, that is the Gabriel Oak, Bathsheba Everdeen, Francis Troy and the William Boldwood. These are the prominent characters in this novel. If you say about the Gabriel Oak, he is the hero, or he is the novel's hero, and he is a farmer, shepherd and bailiff, marked by his humble and honest way. His exceptional skill with animals and farming and an unparalleled loyalty, he is Bathsheba's first suitor, later the bailiff on her farm, and finally her husband at the very end of the novel. Gabriel is characterized by an incredible ability to read the natural world and control it without fighting against. It occupies the position of quiet observer throughout most of the book, yet he knows just when to step in to save Bathsheba and others from the catastrophe. Students, if you see the main theme or main summary of this novel, at the beginning of the novel, Bathsheba Everdeen is a beautiful young woman without a fortune. She meets Gabriel Oak, a young farmer, and saves his life one evening. He asks her to marry him, but she refuses because she does not love him. Upon inheriting her uncle's prosperous farm, she moves away to the town of Weatherbury. A disaster befalls Gabriel's farm and he loses his ship. He is forced to give up farming. He goes looking for work and in his travels finds himself in Weatherbury. After risking a local farm from fire, he asks the mistress if she needs a shepherd. It is Bathsheba and she hires him. As Bathsheba learns to manage her farm, she becomes acquainted with her neighbor, Mr. Boldwood, and on a whim sends him a valentine with the words, "Marry me." Boldwood becomes obsessed with her and becomes her second suitor. Rich and handsome, he has been sought after many women. Bathsheba refuses him because she does not love him, but she then agrees to reconsider her discussion. That very night, Bathsheba meets a handsome soldier, Sergeant Troy, unbeknownst to Bathsheba. He was recently impregnated a local girl, Fanny Robin, and almost married her. Troy falls in love with Bathsheba and energizing and dragging Boldwood. Bathsheba travels to Bath to warm Troy of Boldwood's anger, and while she is there, Troy convinces her to marry him. But Gabriel has remained her friend throughout and does not approve of the marriage. A few weeks after his marriage to Bathsheba, Troy sees Fanny poor and sick. She later dies giving birth to her child. Bathsheba discovers that Troy is the father. Grief-stricken at Fanny's death and riddled with shame, Troy runs away and is thought to have drowned. With Troy supposedly dead, Boldwood becomes more and more emphatic about Bathsheba marrying him. Troy sees Bathsheba at a fair and decides to return to her. Boldwood holds a Christmas, to which he invites Bathsheba and again proposes marriage. Just after she has agreed, Troy arrives to claim her. Bathsheba screams and Boldwood shoots Troy dead. He is sentenced to life in prison. A few months later, Bathsheba marries Gabriel, now a proposed bailiff. If you See, the Hardy's technique, Thomas Hardy's technique as a novelist shows a simplification of the Victorian technique of novel writing. In place of the luxuriant shapelessness of Dickinson and Thackeray, Hardy gave to the novel a much needed shape and form, order, and symmetry. Hardy is not only an able artist but a perfect craftsman. There are, of course, some of who deny artistic genius to Hardy. The cause against Hardy is summed up as follows: there is no variety in his stories. There is a rather obvious Shakespearean imitation in drawing of some of the rustic characters like Joseph Poor, Grass, and other assembled at the Malothus. These rustic characters seems to be unbelievable witty, wise. The dialogue is hybrid, mixture which is partially dialect and partially standard English. Hardy himself has replied to his critic about his point. He says, an author may be said to fairly convey the spirit of intelligent peasant talk it. He retained the idiom and characteristics expression, although he may not use absolute pronunciation and mispronunciation of words. In this first chapter, if you see the Gabriel Oak and her 20-year-old shepherd who has earned enough to acquire a small piece of land of his own. He has bought a farm of 200 sheep. Many of these were pregnant in a first scene. He watches a young woman with black hair drive up in a carriage laden with gourds. The Gabriel observes her as she waits for her driver, thinking she is alone. She takes out a mirror and gazes at herself. Shortly afterward, he sees her again, stopped at a toll gate. She is arguing with the gatekeeper over the toll, and Gabriel steps in to pay the 2 pennies for her. When she drives off, she speaks with the gatekeeper and tells him that the black-haired woman has one fault, that is vanity. Tending to his sheep over the next few weeks, Gabriel spots the woman on several occasions as she walks to milk a cow at a nearby dairy. In several scenes, he watches her without being seen, and he learns that she lives with her aunt. They meet when he goes to look for the hat she has lost, but he embraces her with his bold manner. Then one night, Gabriel falls asleep in his shepherd's hut with the windows closed but the hearth still lit. He nearly dies from smoke inhalation, but the woman breaks in and saves his life. He thanks her and asks her name. She refuses to tell him outright, challenging him to find it out for himself. Gabriel learns that her name is Bathsheba Everdeen. He visits her aunt in order to ask for niece's hand in marriage. But the aunt tells him that Bathsheba already has many lovers. Bathsheba runs after Gabriel to tell him that what her aunt has said is untrue, and in a funny and misunderstanding laden exchange, the two discuss the possibility of their marriage. Gabriel assumes that if she has run after him to tell him, he may court her. Then she must be interested. However, she assures him that she would never marry him because she does not love him. When he asks for her second time, she again refuses. He at last agrees to drop the matter, though he declares he will always love her. Not long after proposes, Gabriel Oak hears the Bathsheba Everdeen has left the neighborhood and gone to a place called Weatherbury. He finds that it is no regular path for getting out of love, as there is a forgetting in, and loves her all more once she is gone. The rest of chapter 5 describes a tragic event that changed Gabriel's fate forever. He has two sheepdogs, loyal and reliable, one named George and George's son, who is still learning a herd sheep and is often too enthusiastic. One night, on one of the race occasions, when Gabriel goes to sleep in his own bed rather than in the fields, he wakes in the middle of the night to the sound of sheep bells clanging wildly. He goes outside and follows their footprints to the edge of a steep chalk pit. Looking in, he sees hundreds of dying sheep and mangled sheep carcasses. The younger dog has unwittingly chased them over the edge in his zeal. Ruined financially, without his sheep, Gabriel can no longer farm. However, he does not immediately dwell upon his own misfortune. His first impulsive is to pity the gentle Eves and their unborn lambs. His second impulsive to that God that Bathsheba did not marry him, for he wishes only prosperity for her. He regretfully shoots the dog, pays his debts, and finds himself with nothing more than his clothes. In the sixth chapter begins 2 months later at hiring fair for farm laborers, including shepherds, bailiffs, carters, wagoners, and thatchers. Hardy describes the 200-300 man group as a whole and then focuses in on particular man who turns out to be Gabriel. After successfully advertising himself as a bailiff, he resignedly offers his shepherding skills for hiring. Still, no one gives him a job. Finally, he earns a little money by playing his flute for the passers-by, and he decides to try another fair the next day. He falls asleep in wagon and wakes up to find it moving toward Weatherbury where Bathsheba has settled. He allows it to take him most of the way and then slip out of the wagon unseen, intending to continue on to Weatherbury on foot. He pauses when he sees a strange light and realizes something large is on fire in the distance. A crowd gathers helplessly around a straw rick, but Gabriel knows just what to do. Without regard to his own safety, he coordinates the efforts to extinguish the fire, climbing himself to the top of the rig to stamp out the flames with his shepherd's crook. In the meantime, two women watch the proceedings, one of whom is a mistress of the farm. Once Gabriel has put out the fire, she asks him how she can repay him. He approaches her and asks if she has need of shepherd services. When she lifts her veil, the two figures stare at each other in astonished recognition. Bathsheba decides to hire him and she asks him to speak to the bailiff, a bad tempered man, as Gabriel walked through the forest to an inn called Warren's Malthus. He comes across a slim girl, rather thinly clad, who asks him not to say that he has seen her, as he reaches to give her a shilling, seeing that she is poor and worrying she may be cold. He touches her arm. By mistake, wearied Gabriel's fingers alighted on the young woman's wrist. It was beating with a throb of tragic intensity. He had frequently felt the same hard, quick beat in the femoral artery of his lambs, who overdriven it suggested a consumption too great of a vanity which, to judge from her figure and stature, was already too little. Gabriel passes her and joins the other farm laborers in the Malthouse. Chapter 8 takes place in the Malthouse and introduces us to the local laborers and their culture. Hardy attentively records the men's dialect and their ways of life, and he takes care to differentiate one from another thought. And if you see the one from and another thought, to some extent the characters fit into type. Gabriel drinks with them, and then after he has left new arrivals at Bathsheba has fired her bailiff. Pennyways having caught him stealing, and her youngest servant, Fanny Robin, has run away. This, we guess, is the slim girl Gabriel met in the forest. Bathsheba asks her workers for help in finding her for information about the lover with whom she may have fled. The next few chapters establish the rhythm of life in Bathsheba Everdeen's farm and introduce a new plot line into the novel. Bathsheba's relationship with Mr. Boldwood. The day after Gabriel's arrival, the dignified bachelor Mr. Boldwood knocks on the Bathsheba's door as she and her servant Lady Smallbury are cleaning. Boldwood comes to ask if there is any news of Fanny Robin, whom he had helped when she was younger. From ladies' gossip, we learn that Boldwood is a confirmed bachelor who many of the local women have tried unsuccessfully to woo. Bathsheba calls a meeting of the farm workers to announce that she has dismissed the Pennyways for thieving and that she will take on the baffle's responsibilities herself. She also asks for news of Fanny Robin, who is still missing. Chapter 10 describes the meeting and consists primarily of a roll call in which the various farm laborers identify themselves and their trades to both Bathsheba and the reader. In the 11th chapter reveals what has happened in the Fanny Robin. Here we see her arrive at the barracks of Sergeant Troy, many miles north of Weatherbury. The narrator describes the scene from a distance. We see Fanny as a spot, almost lost in the snow. She throws snowballs at a window to get the sergeant's attention, and they have a brief conversation in which she reminds him that he has promised to marry her. He responds courteously but agrees to uphold his promise. When he shuts his own window, the other soldiers are laughing. In the next chapter, it is marked day, and Bathsheba tries out her new role of farmer. The only woman in the group, she nonetheless comports herself well. The only man oblivious to her beauty is Mr. Boldwood, who does not look at her once, as Liddy remarks on the way home. When Bathsheba and Liddy are at home on Sunday, Bathsheba is about to send a valentine to a young boy when Liddy suggests that she send it to Boldwood instead. On a whim, Bathsheba agrees, setting in the motion one of the novel's tragedies. The valentine contains a meaningless ditty. Roses are red, violets are blue, but Bathsheba impulsively stamps it with a seal that reads, "Marry me." The narrator reflects that Bathsheba knows nothing of love. Unfortunately, the letter has a profound effect on Boldwood. It is the one ornate object in a puritanical plain home, and he places it on the mantelpiece. Disturbed and excited, then he receives a second letter. In his excitement, he opens it hurriedly, only noticing that it is addressed to Gabriel. He delivers it to Gabriel the next morning, and Gabriel shares its contents with Boldwood. It is a letter from Fanny identifying herself as the girl Gabriel met in the forest and returning the shilling he had given her. The letter also announces her engagement to Sergeant Troy. As she leaves, Boldwood asks Gabriel to identify the handwriting on the valentine, and he tells Boldwood that is Bathsheba's. In the interior of church, several women watch a soldier enter and realize that a wedding gall is about to occur. As she waits for his bride to arrive, the clock strikes the quarter hour, and the women titter. Finally, after a full hour of waiting, the soldier leaves the church humiliated. Just at that moment, his bride runs across the square to meet him. She has been waiting at All Souls rather than at All Saints, and had just realized her mistake. The two are Fanny Robin and Sergeant Troy. She asks him when they can reschedule their wedding, but she refuses to set a date. In the marketplace again, Boldwood sees Bathsheba Everdeen as if for the first time. He finds her unbelievably beautiful and asks someone nearby whether she is generally considered handsome. Bathsheba notices his attention and regrets having sent the valentine. She decides to explain and apologize, but she realizes that he might misread her initiation of conversation as of a romantic interest. Chapter 18 gives us a little background about Boldwood. He is a confirmed bachelor, wealthy and well established at the neighboring farm. Hardy warns us that Boldwood is not an ordinary nature. The positives and negatives in his character balance only precariously, and he plunges easily into extreme emotion. The narrative focuses on Bathsheba and Gabriel as they watch Boldwood from afar. Gabriel sees Bathsheba blush, and remembering the valentine, he begins to suspect something between the pair. At a village-wide sheep washing, Boldwood approaches Bathsheba, who tries to avoid him. He follows her off toward the river, and when they are alone, he proposes to her. She refuses, and he continues to try to persuade her, finally getting her to permit him to propose again later. Chapter 20 charts Bathsheba's reaction to Boldwood's offer. Hardy tells us that Bathsheba feels no wish whatever for the married state in the abstract. She also enjoys the independence of running a farm on her own, as she is considering the possibility of. She approaches Gabriel and begins to ask him about what the farm workers had thought of her appearing together with Boldwood. The two of them quarrel when she asks his opinion of her conduct concerning to the bachelor, and he tells her it is unworthy of any thoughtful, comely woman. She then accuses him of being jealous, but he tells her that he has long ago given up all thoughts marrying her. Finally, she orders to him to leave the farm, and he agrees. Only one day after Gabriel's departure, the farm workers announce that another disaster has occurred. The sheep have eaten young clover and their stomachs are expanding fatally. Only Gabriel knows how to perform the operation that can save them. But Sheba sends him an order to come back. He replies by messenger that she will have to ask properly. And she does so, writing, "Do not desert me, Gabriel." She returns and saves all the sheep but one. But Sheba regrets firing him and he agrees to come back to the farm. During the annual sheep shearing, the workers discuss Bathsheba and Boldwood, wondering if they will marry, and at the sheep shearing supper, Bathsheba allows Boldwood to sit with her inside the house. At the very end of the supper, they are left alone together, and Bathsheba tells him that she will try to love him. She finally almost promises herself to him, saying that she may feel ready to marry by harvest time. Moments after she tells Boldwood that she might marry him, Bathsheba wanders over her farm and she always does checking to see that everything is in order. She carries a darkened lantern so she cannot be seen. The narrator tells us that unconvinced to the Bathsheba, Gabriel performs the same task every evening, a sign of his unending devotion to her. As she walks through the plantation, she hears footsteps nearing her and bumps into someone on the path. It is Sergeant Troy, and his spur has caught on her dress. She cannot free herself, and in the dark, the two hold a conversation without identifying themselves. When Troy finally opens her lantern, Bathsheba is surprised to see he is a soldier. Having expected a suspicious looking intruder, Troy, for his part, is also struck by the appearance of his interlocutor. He immediately praises her beauty and delays in his untangling of her dress. She finally frees herself, confused by his phrase, and speaking somewhat curtly, she later asks Liddy whether there is a soldier living near the fur plantation, and Liddy tells her that it must be Sergeant Troy, but Sheba regrets being rude to him. In the next chapter, Hardy gives an account of Troy's character, much as the another author has done with Boldwood earlier on. We learn that Troy lives only for the moment and displays the opposite of Gabriel's ceaseless loyalty. He is full of activity without direction and regularly deceives women. Toward the end of the chapter, we learn that he had joined the haymakers in their task for the day. Bathsheba notices him in the fields, and as soon as he sees her, he approaches. Troy and Bathsheba converse for the second time, and chapter 26 follows a long dialogue between them with a little description. Troy apologizes for not recognizing who she was in the woods and again compliments her. From her responses, we can see that she is flattered, bewildered by his admiration. A very different woman from the scornful, proud individual we have heretofore seen asserting her independence with the Gabriel and Boldwood. Troy offers her his watch as a gift and she refuses but agrees that he may continue to join the haymakers. In the next chapter, their intimacy is increasing when Troy encounters Bathsheba maintaining the bees. He helps her to donning the ridiculous looking protective gear. When he made intentions, the famous sword exercise that soldiers learn, the confesses that she would love to see it, and they set a date to meet. Bathsheba lives on living. Soon afterward, with the intention of visiting Lady, she has returned to Boldwood to refuse him, who does not want to see him. When he returns from his trip, Troy is in Bath and is planning to return to Weatherbury in the next day or two. On her way, Lady's Bathsheba runs into Boldwood, who has received her letter but will not accept her refusal. The two of them have a heated discussion in which he reminds her of Valentine the Saint and lacks she tries to persuade him that it meant nothing. Finally, she claims that she lacks warmth. Boldwood responds by telling her that knows she loves Troy and he chastises her for being dazzled by brass and scarlet. She admits that she does not love Troy and kisses him. He flies into a jealous rage, declaring, "I pray God the may not come into my sight, for I may be tempted beyond myself." But Bathsheba fears greatly for Troy. The novelist builds towards its climax in chapter 52, appropriately named Converging Courses. Hardy divides the chapter into seven sections, charting the activities of Boldhood, Bathsheba, Gabriel, and Troy as they prepare for the and attend Boldhood's Christmas event party. The party is talked about all over Weatherbury, largely because it is so unusual for Boldhood to give a party. He has decorated his long hall meticulously, but we are told, in spite of all this, the spirit of revelry was wanting in the atmosphere of the house. Boldwood is not a natural host. But Bathsheba is dressing for the party. She tells Liddy, I am foolishly agitated. I am the cause of the party and that upset she. She decides to continue to wear her mourning and dress in black for the festivities. Boldwood too is dressing and he has given an inordinate amount of attention to his clothes, hiring a tailor to alter everything. Gabriel visits him and Boldwood asks for his assistance in tying his tie. He asks, does a woman keep her promise, Gabriel? And Gabriel answers, if it is not inconvenient to her, she may. Gabriel warns him not to build too much on promises, and it is clear that Boldwood harbors fear of Bathsheba's refusal. He is highly agitated. In the chapter, we learn that Boldwood has turned himself in at the Casterbridge prison, while Bathsheba he has intended to try and called for a surgeon. Months later, in March, Boldwood trial occurs. The onlookers learn that Boldwood had prepared a set of ladies' dress in the expensive fabric in a closet in his home and several sets of jewelry in packages labeled. Bathsheba Boldwood is sentenced to death by hanging. However, the residents of Weatherbury are convinced that Boldwood is not morally responsible for his actions, and Gabriel sends a petition to him, Home Secretary, requesting reconsideration of sentence. Finally, on the eve of his execution, the news comes that he has been pardoned and given confinement during Her Majesty's pleasure instead. Troy is buried in the same grave as Fanny Robin. Bathsheba's spirits slowly revive as the spring turns to summer. One day, as she is visiting the grave, she sees Gabriel singing in the church choir. He joins her at the grave and tells her that he intends to leave Weatherbury. Upset, she begs him to stay, but he will not. When she receives his official final notice as bailiff, she carries and decides to visit him at his cottage. He invites her in the inn and explains that one of his motivations for leaving are the rumors going around the village about a romance between the two of them. After some confusion, Bathsheba admits that she has come, courting him, and the two agree to marry. The last chapter portrays the quiet wedding Gabriel and Bathsheba. After the wedding, the two dine at the farm, and all men of the village gather to sing and play for them. The title of the Far from the Madding Crowd, if you see the oral analysis of the Far from the Madding Crowd, oral analysis, in the oral analysis, the title Far from the Madding Crowd comes from Thomas Gray's famous 18th century poem Elegy written in a country churchyard. Far from the madding crowd's ignoble strife, their sober wishes never learned to stray along the cool sequestered well of life. They kept the noiseless tenor of their way. By alluding to Gray's poem, Hardy evokes the rural culture that by Hardy's lifetime had become threatened with extinction at the hands of ruthless industrialization. His novel thematizes the importance of man's connection to and understanding of the natural world. Gabriel Oak embodies Hardy's ideal of life in harmony with the forces of the natural world. The novel also contemplates the relationship between luck or chance and moral responsibility. Why should we live in morally upright life if tragedy strikes us all equally anyway? While some characters like Gabriel are always responsible and cautious, others like Sergeant Troy are careless and destructive. Hardy was very much influenced by the ideas of Charles Darwin, who maintained that the development of biological species and by extension of human society and history is shaped by chance and not by the design of a God. Another theme is the danger and destruction inherent in romantic love and marriage. Hardy exposes the inconsistencies, irrationalities, and betrayals that often plague romantic relationship. Bathsheba begins the novel an independent woman, but by falling in love with Troy, she nearly destroys her life. Similarly, Hardy presents us with many couples in which one partner is more in love than the other, and he shows what disastrous events results from this inequality. So, I hope students you have understood the main theme and plot of this main plot or main summary of this novel, The Far from the Madding Crowd. If you are not able to understand, you can review the same video often. So thank you students, thank you very much, and see you in the next video.